in the Kovno ghetto. Arrangements had been made for my brother, my cousin, and myself to be taken out. At night, we were to be put into different orphanages. The hardest thing for me was never seeing my mother again. My mother died in Stutthof, in concentration camp.
My family was deported to the southern part of France to a place called Camp Gurs. What the French government had done in cooperation and collaboration with the Nazis is to build these camps to hold Jews like us until the Nazis could decide what to do with us next. There were 12,000 men, women, children, and babies in this one holding camp alone. Of those 12,000 people that very first winter, more than 1,000 died of starvation, disease, or froze to death. Somehow, some way, my parents were able to keep us alive. Fortunately for my sister and myself, we were rescued by the French resistance from Camp Gurs in August of 1942. I was placed in hiding with a French Christian family.
November 5th, 1943, after we had been in the ghetto, Commandant Forster arrived. He made an announcement. Today, we're taking children under 13 and old and disabled adults to someplace better. Fear went through everybody. They knew that wasn't true. My mother sought out Bella. She had smuggled her little daughter out. My mother knew that. So she beseeched her. Bella, Bella, please, please help me save my Rezala. She's still little enough. I was 2.5. Her father-in-law had a sister, Elena. She and her husband were middle-aged, 40 and 60. They had no children, Catholic. She said yes. She would risk her life to save a Jewish child. Bella came, she put on a man's coat so she would have room inside to hide me. She went into the door, and there was Elena, and she handed me over to her. She took me into her arms, into her home, and into her heart.
We lived in the center of Berlin. A German detective warned us that an arrest warrant was issued to my father, and he told us that Tuesday would be the last day that you can safely escape out of Germany. The man also helped other people, and in 1943 got caught, put against the wall, and shot.
I was about 15 and a half when Hitler came into Vienna. My father lost his job right away. The company was Arisiert. The Aryans took over. So he pursued the possibilities. Australia, America, Canada, Uruguay, Paraguay, anywhere. Nobody wanted us. Then came the Kristallnacht in November, and they destroyed Jewish businesses and all sorts of buildings. My friends and schoolmates suddenly didn't know me.
My father was a Frontkämpfer in the war, in World War I, and he got the Iron Cross, and then therefore I could go to public school as a Jew until Kristallnacht, and then I was thrown out of school.
My father was sent to concentration camp Buchenwald, like all the other men from our town. My mother heard rumors that when you have a place to go to, they would release the men. And she also found out that you can go to Shanghai, China without a visa if you have the funds to pay for the passage.
We came to Shanghai, and there were Jewish organizations. They were prepared for us.
The American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee leased American mission colleges which had been vacated during the wars between the Chinese and the Japanese.
Shanghai was occupied by the Japanese, but was surrounded by the Chinese. We were totally cut off from everything.
Our dormitories were the classrooms with the blackboard still on the wall.
There were about 40 beds in one room. If you were a family of 4, you had 2 bunk beds and a curtain around it, and that was your privacy.
Himmler, he had sent a Gestapo chief to Shanghai to talk with the Japanese to tell them how to get rid of the 18,000 refugees. He said, put all the Jews on boats and then they drift to sea and drown. And the Japanese didn't like that. At that time, the Germans had already established the concentration camps with gas. And he said, you can do that here too. The Japanese didn't like that idea. And then he said, well, then at least put them in a ghetto. So the Japanese agreed to that, to please the Germans, because they were allies.
We were not allowed to leave. If you had a job outside and you wanted to leave, you had to go to the office, the particular office, where there was a little man, my height, 5 feet. His name was Goya, and he was brutal. He would stand on the table and slap around the people, men, women, whatever, and gave or not gave, whichever the mood was, a pass to leave the district.
And you were only allowed to leave the ghetto at one point here, and you had a pass.
It was very dirty, of course. Cholera, typhoid. There were air raids every day. We were scared, of course. There were no shelters.
On July 17, 1945, then the Americans came and they bombed part of the area where we lived, and then the war ended. And we could go on the other side of the street, and nobody could do anything to us anymore.
There were only 2 places that would accept Jews, and that was either Shanghai, China, or Havana, Cuba. The Cuban government authorized the Cuban immigration minister, Benitez, to issue Cuban landing permits, which he did, but he charged for them. And my mother paid $500 for landing permits for our family. When we arrived, the president told the Jewish agencies that Cuba was a poor country and they couldn't allow these 900 Jews into the country unless they charge $500 per person, which meant $450,000. And that was an awful lot of money in those days. So the agencies told President Brew of Cuba that they'll get the money, but it might take a little while. Well, after a week, he got impatient and said the ship's going to have to leave the harbor because it's in the way of commerce. The passenger committee on board the ship, they decided to send Roosevelt and all the heads of state of the Western democracies like Canada and Mexico and Argentina and Chile telegrams asking for asylum for these passengers. No one responded. In the meantime, the money was raised and they asked the president, where shall we send the money? We got it. And his answer was, I don't want the money, I don't want to see the Jews, I don't want to see the ship. If it tries to come into our harbor, my Navy will stop it. So that's all the Nazis had to hear. Goebbels, the head of their propaganda ministry, holds this meeting with all the Nazi hierarchy, and he says, you see, if the rest of the world doesn't care what happens to those Jews on the St. Louis, do you think they're going to care what we do with the rest of Europe's Jews? And that gave the Nazis the green light for the final solution. And this is the significance of the story of the St. Louis, which is now called the Voyage of the Damned.
I grew up through the period where the Nazis were coming to power. My mother was working at forced labor for the Nazis, sewing uniforms, 12-hour shifts every night. My father was working 12-hour shifts during the day, sorting the valuables and the shoes that were coming back from the death camps. I was almost 14 when I went on the Kindertransport.
On my 20th birthday, I left Germany. I said goodbye to my mother. I cried from Strasbourg to Paris. It was terribly painful, not knowing whether they would get out or not. My whole immediate family survived. They're all in Israel.
In 1917, my father was something of an intern or a senior medical student. He was called to take care of a 10-year-old girl, and she had diphtheria, for which at the time there was neither treatment nor prevention. So he stayed up with that girl all night, did whatever he could for her, and the girl survived, which was miraculous at the time. One day my father turned up missing. He was taken prisoner. He was on his way to the death train to Buchenwald. Before he could step on the train, there was a soldier there with a rifle. He called him by his name, Dr. Joshua. If you want to crawl under the train and out the other side, you better do it in 30 seconds, because after that I can't help you. Of course, my father went, and he had a hard time identifying this strange soldier. And he says, "Oh my God, this was the father of the girl that I treated for diphtheria."
I left Germany in 1939, about 6 months before war broke out. Said goodbye to my mother, hoping that in the very near future there would be a chance to get her out of Germany too. But that chance never materialized. I haven't had parents since I was 17, and I've been pretty independent ever since.
We were having dinner and we were listening to the radio of the German troops marching into Vienna, and the jubilation was just incredible. The next day there were swastika flags all over the city. My brother and I immediately felt we have to see where we could possibly go. My father said, "Well, that'll blow over." I had a cousin in New York who was willing to send us affidavits. My mother brought me to the train, and we somehow both knew it's questionable whether we'll see each other again.
Early in the morning, my parents took me to the railroad station. They tried to explain to me that I was going to England, but don't worry, they're going to join me soon. And I said, "Why am I going to England?" And they said, "Well, it's for your own good." Of course, as a 6-year-old, it didn't make any sense to me. My father gave me a silver pencil. My father said, "This is a remembrance." And I said, "What do you mean a remembrance? You said you were going to come to England." And I thought, my parents are just strange. The railroad station was complete chaos. I got on the train and found a window seat. I could look out and I saw my parents crying, obviously, and I again thought, they just don't get it. Why are they putting me on this train if they're so sad to see me on the train? One of the guys in uniform said, "Now, if you have anything valuable, turn it over now." And I thought of my silver pencil. I took it out of my coat pocket and slipped it underneath my belt and into my underwear. I still have the silver pencil.
My mother got a call from a friend that the Gestapo was rounding up Jews block by block. And on a moment's notice, she and my dad and me as a baby, my grandmother, took off and went into hiding in a very small basement underneath the summer cottage just outside the Berlin border, with no water, no toilet, no windows. My dad was a very talented amateur painter. He made hundreds of oil paintings in this basement from memory by candlelight, basically. And some non-Jewish friends would take those paintings and trade them for food. That's how we survived.
We had a very good life in Germany. We had a furniture store, and we had to leave everything. And then we came to Paris, and the Jewish organizations took us on. When the war came, we left Paris and we went all the way south in a small town, Bagnères de Bigorre in the Pyrenees. And we had a very nice chief of police. And every time he got a list of people to be deported during the night, he would advise a number of Jews and tell them to advise the others not to sleep home that night. And I remember 5 o'clock in the morning, a knock on the door, and the police were there, and they would say, "Is your father home?" And I would say no. And then he would make a report that all those Jews were not home when they came to get them. The chief of police, unfortunately, was kidnapped and taken to Dachau.
The Nazis passed a law saying whoever hid out Jews would be shot with the Jews. So at that point we developed a mutual fear relationship for the next 20 months. We were transferred one night into the farmer's barn, and he dug out a horizontal rectangular hole and covered it up with manure, and we were horizontally like this for a month and month. And I remember, to survive, my father was stealing milk in the middle of the night.
They decided to send us in cattle cars to Russia, Siberia. Jewish community, when we were on those trains, send us supplies. This was something really touching, because it was very hard to do that. And the hardship was unbelievable.
A guy in the corner of the street said to my father, "They're getting the Jews today. All the Jews are going to be sent to Auschwitz." My 5 uncles were very active in the resistance. They said that we should go to a small, remote village in northwest Greece that was, at the time, a hideaway for the resistance. We got into the back of the truck. It was drizzling rain and cold. Just as we were almost there, the Nazis with machine guns stopped everybody. They asked to step down. In the meantime, because I was so cold, I was under my father's coat. And I fell asleep, apparently, until I heard the noises and I heard the guns. And my father, he didn't get up to follow the other people. A German soldier came up in the truck, and my father didn't say anything except he opened his coat and showed me that I was sleeping there, and I kept my eyes real tight, closed. He motioned to my father to be quiet. He made a turn and stepped down of the truck, and then we heard their cars move away.
We are the Jews. Something goes wrong, we're always accused. Speak up. Don't let anti-Semitism grow.
All of us belong to one race, the human race. So let's be good neighbors. Let's help, not hate each other.
I was born in Poland, in a little town, Żarki. I am 96 past. I'm heading to the 97. We was 8 children. They took us from that place out from Pionki to Auschwitz.
We were 2 sisters and 1 more brother besides me. I was the youngest and I survived. When the war broke out, I was 13 and a half years old. They took 260 of us and sent us to Auschwitz.
Our city had a population of about 750,000, and 1/3 of the population were Jewish. We watched the German army march into our city, and they came in with such a power that was frightening. The Germans picked the most dilapidated area of Lodz, surrounded it with barbed wire. We piled into one room. We were 7 people. It was so cold that the water in the tea kettle froze during the night. And the ghetto, everybody had to work. Whoever didn't work didn't live. That was as simple as that. The German head of the ghetto came to our place and said, meine liebe Juden, you know, my dear Jews, you're going to go with your family to a different place. You'll have better food. And of course, we didn't believe it.
I was born in Hus, Czechoslovakia. I lived with my parents, 3 brothers and 2 sisters. When the Nazis arrived in 1943, things got miserable. It got worse all the time. As a Jew, you weren't allowed to go out only during the day and during certain hours. We had to wear a yellow star and a yellow armband. In 1944, sometimes in April, Passover, my father chanted Kiddush. Suddenly he broke down, he cried. He says, children, I don't think we're going to be together next year. The next day, 2 Nazis came to our door. We were marched to the railroad station. They were packing in everybody in their cattle cars without food or water. And we arrived to Auschwitz extermination camp.
They gave us a piece of bread. And they closed in the boxcar. Started out, and in the middle of the night, the boxcar stops. And then the doors opened up. It's like the doors of hell opened up. Raus, raus, out, started screaming, pulling us down. I jumped down and helped Mother and my sister down. And right away they start screaming, men this side and women this side. That piece of bread that we got in the beginning of the trip, I ate it right away, my sister. My mother didn't touch it. As they pulled me away, she pushed that piece of bread in my hand and said, you take it, you'll need it. And that's the last I saw of my mother.
Oh, everybody was marching towards Dr. Mengele. He was standing with a long baton in his hand, and he was selecting who should live, who should die.
And he made rechts, links, right, left. So the left lane, 15 minutes later, he sent to the gas chamber.
Before we separated, my father hugged me. He said, Irving, don't give up, be strong, we'll meet again. And that stuck in my mind. I think that's what saved my life. But I kept on thinking I got to come back and meet my father again.
I saw my brother, talked him through the barbed wires. My brother told me like that. He said, Sam, stay well and be healthy when you're alive, because I'm not going to be alive tomorrow. Tomorrow it's my day to die. And tell the world what you see it here. and I left in the same last time.
The only thing I truly think about when I think about the Holocaust is he didn't succeed. Look what we've done. Look what we've built, what we have raised. So many of us have given so much to mankind.
It is so horrible what they did, the inhumanity, and the world stood by. 1.5 million Jewish children of Europe were murdered. Well, only 1% of us survived.
These experiences, I think, made me want to help everybody I can.
I talk to schools, but it seems to me the interest is waning. In New Jersey, Holocaust studies are mandatory. Here in Colorado, it's up to the individual teacher.
It's with me all the time. The people, my aunts and uncles, the whole family whom I lost, I simply can't get rid of it.
The world should know that things like the Holocaust can occur in any society, and it always happens when the good people are silent about it. I've tried to live my life to speak up when things like this happen.
When a government comes in with the express purpose of hurting or killing Jews, you start packing. You don't wait 6 years.
We have an obligation to remember the Holocaust and to help when Holocausts continue as they do across the globe.
It is absolutely necessary to teach children love instead of hatred. This should start from the beginning in nursery schools, and to teach children not to bully other children. This is all part of it.
I think it's very important for us who survived to be able to tell our story for as long as we can, and not to forget that discrimination is one of the biggest sins of the world.
I can't forget, of course, but I won't let my past ruin my future. Now I'm 90 years old, I'm happy, I have kids and grandkids, I still drive. We're not too far, of course.
Hitler wants to destroy us completely. We don't exist. At least we build back up some families. That is a big, big thing.
People knew about it, that they were killing people by the thousands every day, and nobody cared. We thought anti-Semitism was buried during Auschwitz. Anti-Semitism is back alive now. If we don't stop it, we cannot predict what's going to be.
When I go speaking to people, I go. I never say I will not come. I go because my brother told me, stay alive and tell the world. I give my promise, yes. So that's what I'm doing. I promise I will do it, and I do it.